Hi, everybody. My name is Ela. I'm co-founder of Supermarkt Berlin. That's a platform for digital culture and alternative economies. Together with Andreas, we have co-founded Platform Cooperatives Germany. And also together, we are working with the Circles team, Circles UBI. And we will share some experience about the Circles project as one example of community currency. Would you like to introduce yourself beyond what I just said?
Yeah, so as Ella said, my name is Andreas. I'm a Berlin entrepreneur, and besides Platform Corps Germany and also the Circles UBI project, I work with the Smart Freelancer Corp, which gives social security and an umbrella to freelancers. You can talk to me about it later. And yeah, I think let's get started about community currencies.
Let's get started. And also we hope to hear a little bit from you, from your own experience with community currencies. I have to say that my life was heavily influenced by community currencies without me even knowing it. Where I grew up, it was a tiny village here in Germany with a single mom. I realized only later that our life was only possible because the people in that village did a lot of community currencies where no money actually exchanged hands, but there was a lot of time banking, there was a lot of bartering, a lot of gifting. And it was very clear that without these practices, it wouldn't have been possible for my family to make ends meet. And it was only much later when I realized, okay, that's what people call community currencies, because we didn't look at it as a currency. For us, it was like a necessity. So therefore, all of it was very informal. If it was time banking, if it was looking after kids, which can be part of time banking, just as walking dogs, etc. I realized only later that there are emerging practices around it. And what has always been part of human society and human behavior, especially now, becomes more and more a very, let's say, a practice where people very consciously decide to create pockets of resilience and resistance, maybe, outside of the prevailing market economy. So if we look at the characteristics of community currencies and what makes a community currency, maybe I start with a few instances and then you can jump in. So for me, a community currency is clearly happening outside of the market economy. It is something that can contain money, but it can also be money-less. It can be token-based, such as circles. A community currency serves those that, for several reasons, are excluded from the global markets. It can be people who do not have access to the market because of financial scarcity. It can be people who are persecuted, refugees, or people living in very remote and rural areas. So for them, it's absolutely a necessity to create other sources of trade, income, and sales. And I also think that if we talk about community currencies, they are not designed to take over the world, because clearly they are a complementary currency. I think this is also important to understand, that a complementary currency does not really have the capacity to take over like the big global market. And that's also not the goal, I would say. What are your thoughts? What are more characteristics for community currencies?
Well, first of all, I want to second your argument that community currency does not need to be connected to the market, and actually illustrate this with a little story that I heard when we ran some community calls in the first wave of the pandemic, where we fostered a cooperative community, and we had a guest speaker. I think his name was Diego Duta, the head of Lega Corp in Italy, which is an umbrella organization, basically being the host for thousands of co-op and literally hundreds of thousands of end users and of people who are working in those co-ops. And he made the case that not just in the COVID crash when the market dipped, but also in the financial crisis before and the previous crash as well, this huge cooperative network felt really vulnerable and were kind of like attacked and struggled as well, because being based in Italy, in Europe, they also had problems with the euro and their own economic stability. So I asked him why the heck they are not having their own community currency, because on one side they have like all the means of productions. It's really like agricultural co-ops, insurances, bank, housing co-ops, everything what we need for our basic daily needs. And on the other hand, they have all the consumers, but what was missing was their own medium of liquidity, which is disconnected from the market, as you said. And for me, this is actually one of the features why it creates resilience, because in this community currency, you can be disconnected from the market. But on the other hand, a second argument is that every community can design their own properties of their community currency. So it's opening this design space, what Angela also just mentioned. Or if you look back into the last two talks where Angela said, you need to be connected to the fiat world to cover all the beans. But like Grace beforehand said, no, we have to refuse this because otherwise we're still stuck in capitalism. So there you have a lot of opportunity to experience something else, and that's already a great thing for resilience, I think.
Yeah, thank you. Super interesting perspectives. If we look at actual community currencies out there that people use these days, so there's the Bristol pound, there is Chiemgauer in southern Germany, there's even an initiative here in Berlin that tried to launch a community or a local currency here in Berlin. It didn't quite take off, but it's an amazing group of people, and I don't know if they regularly meet. I would be interested in hearing from the people here in the audience. Is there any of you who is using such a local currency, community currency, and which one is it? Would you like to share maybe?
So I'm from Brussels. There is a local currency called the Zin. It's only paper. It's absolutely not working. They try to do an online app version using what's the name? There's only one main that a lot of people are using. I can't remember the name. Anyway, it's really backward. It's really, really impossible to use. The Bristol pound, we talk all the time about it. Actually, it's not working, despite what we say. And there is more and more across Europe, more than 5,000 now, local currencies. I love it. I'm a big fan, but the reality is I've yet to see one that is working beyond the initial group of people that is really motivated, but it's not working. There's only the VIR that is working, but that's because it's within a small community of SMEs. And then the War Girl was a great story. There is a great documentary about that in Austria, the War Girl, which is a very interesting one. So who has an example of a local currency besides the VIR that is actually working?
Yeah, hi. I also have quite some experience with local currencies. I'm originally from Greece, so you may have heard of what has been going on in our local economy for a while now. As soon as the crisis started there, I was among the people who basically tried all the different alternatives, from time banks to local currencies digitally, to local currencies not digitally, to bartering, to fair trade, to all the possible things that you could imagine. Nothing ended up working in the long term. It worked for a short term and for a small group of people. And the main issue that I've seen repeated again and again and again and again was that basic needs were not covered in it. So I saw consistently the behavior of the majority of the people participating in the community that was practicing it, basically thinking, what can I do out of the ordinary to bring it there? Like, can I produce some art maybe to sell in this? It will not be my food, it will not be housing, it will not be, I don't know, gas for the car or repairing my bicycle or my mobile phone or whatever, this was never covered. Never. And the only way that this would work in the long term is if some of these basics are getting covered. And the only exception that I've started seeing in that is here in Berlin. I'm working with circles as well. And the latest experiment of circles, which is still in the permanent beta, by the way, there are still technical issues to solve, but they're, yeah. But one thing that is working is exactly that logic, targeting where it needs to be targeted first. For a while now, I've been getting the majority of my groceries with circles. The only thing that made it possible, though, is another temporary measure, which is a particular individual basically donating an enormous amount of money to be able to repay farmers and other people providing products in the community to basically tell them, hey, accept circles and we'll exchange it for euros at the end, so you can also pay your overhead outside to your providers. And this is making a huge difference. This is an experiment, and the reason it's working as an experiment, or the motivation behind that experiment, is to see, can this actually disrupt the market? By taking the initial risk of producers, can it basically create an avalanche for creating this circle that is that is accepting this form of exchange in the long term? And can this work for society? Let's see.
Yeah, thank you so much. You've covered a lot of ground that we also want to talk about in this 20 minutes that we have left. So thank you both. I think one of the takeaways from what you're both saying is, I mean, you have been referring to local currencies. I mean, there's more to it if you talk about community currencies. But nonetheless, I think a really important observation is it has to cover basic human needs, as you say. So I think this is a really important learning. And since you started to introduce circles, and it's a Berlin-based initiative, I would suggest let's talk about circles as an example for both a community currency, but also a particular form of community-powered UBI. And let's look into how the team is trying to especially learn from exactly what you're saying, from all the other, let's say, projects that have emerged and then failed, and how is Circles trying to develop with all that in mind. So basically, maybe Andreas, you would like to give a brief intro to the Circles UBI project.
Yeah, so Circles started actually a couple of years ago with a white paper, and perhaps like two and a half years ago, a wallet was released where each individual can basically register and get a universal basic income, an individual token minted whenever they log in. But as you can imagine, it's just like hot air. The token has no value. So as you correctly said, you need to figure out that you can cover your basic needs. So we, as the Circles Co-op here in Berlin, we actually built some economic loops where we try to onboard businesses that are providing products and services for basic needs. So that's covering food, that's covering some care work. There's actually bike repairs available as well, massages and so on, but also like clothes and really a broad diversity of products. And it's just a start, because we are certainly not there to have a critical mass of business partners, even though I suppose at our marketplace, which is, by the way, at market.joincircles.net, there's approximately 100 business partners offering different products and services where you can spend your circles. But it's not enough, because it doesn't help us when those UBI tokens are spent by end customers or prosumers with the business partners, and they stuck with them. Because what we do, and you mentioned that, we now have the opportunity to cash out those tokens in order to really incentivize more business partners to bring their products into our system. But what we are constantly working on is creating those loops between the business partners, so that for example, Edible Alchemy, which is one of our business partners and also located here at Moos. They produce fermented goods that they buy their supplies at a different farm from our economy, so that they can spend the tokens they earn with end consumers, they can spend for their supplies basically, and this should at one point be a loop so that it's circulating and that we are not in the necessity to buy back the token, and that's pretty much the game we try to play, and yeah, feel free to approach us to become a business partner and provide services and products for all the gaps we still have to fill. Yeah.
Yeah, I think really it's about closing those loops and creating incentives or good reasons for not only business partners but other individuals who provide services to really engage in building of such an economic circle, because that's what it's all about. It starts already, so among the around 20 business partners that work with circles these days, there is exchange going on. It's not just that they are providing products and services and they receive circles in return, but they are also buying from each other, which is an important first step. And we are now working towards having those circles closed. But it's not just about looking at the transaction and about the growing number of people using circles, but it's also about understanding the impact it has on people's lives. And what's really interesting about circles as well is beyond the token mechanics, the social interaction, is actually the web of trust that sits underneath circles. And the more the project emerges and the more data we have and the better we understand how the web of trust actually works in the back end, the more it's possible also to see or to measure resilience of particular communities of practice, to see the way they interact, to understand better who is networked with whom. And the value of such a network is, if it's not just individuals that are networked in bilateral terms, but if there's really like a lot of interconnectedness. And maybe Andreas, you can say a little bit about how do you see this potential of the web of trust, and what's the role that trust plays in the Circles ecosystem? Because you need to have trust before you start using it.
Yeah, to start in the first place, when you register a wallet with Circles, you actually need three people validating you into the network, trusting you, and it's not just a marketing trick or so, but it really means that the one who trusts you accept your tokens, because there's not one Circle token. Each of you has like one individual ERC20 token, right? So they are not all the same. So by trusting, by getting three trust connections, you already know three people who accept your tokens. And that onboards you into the network, but it also prevents bots and people you don't want to have in your network who are creating multiple accounts to accumulate more and more circuits and dilute the value of the economy. That prevents that, because I would not trust a couple of wallets from one of you individually, because then I kind of notice this, right? And this is what we call the web of trust. It also enables different money flows within the network, because there's not just like a direct trust connection where I said I trust you, I get your token, but it also means that via the trust network I do not need to be connected to all of you, but I might still be capable of spending my tokens with you, because you guys might be connected, and then my tokens would be transmitted to one of you, and then their token go to another one of you. So this is a really cool feature that in my view it's really interesting, because it keeps this tendency of money from flowing from poor to rich, where interest rates accumulate more and more. That prevents this a little bit. But as you hinted already, it gives us also the opportunity to create a standalone product out of this web of trust, which is actually really important nowadays when we talk about decentralization and centralization within the crypto space, where KYC and AML are already standard, but where some blockchain projects experiment with face ident and other ridiculous means of identifying us. So there we also want to provide another tool which we could call kind of like, what would you call it? Proof of community, maybe, because you are validated by the people, and you don't need to show your credentials and passport and so. So yeah, maybe this is.
Yeah, I think it's certainly it's a super interesting approach to really take social relations as a measure for credibility, maybe even for identity, and. Also, I mean, you already said so, Circles is not about KYC. You don't have to provide any data, and you still can use it. You get your basic income, and you don't have to give away any personal data. And you can, of course, you can buy things, but you can also put services and products on the marketplace where you can potentially reach people beyond your local network. That's also important to know. While the majority of interactions and work is happening here on the ground in Berlin, but also not in Berlin. We should mention that there's an initiative in Munich as well, and in Bali, Indonesia, that is currently building local communities. With a marketplace, it's potentially possible to buy stuff online and have it shipped without relying exclusively on the local community.
Yeah, and people do this actually because there are orders from the Philippines or basically all sort of continents already happening.
Yeah, I think we are already coming towards the end of this little presentation. Are there any questions?
So first of all, thank you for your great work and sticking to the work. I know that you're doing this since many years. Where I always see this kind of projects fail is you have to stay inside of the system. So the question for me is, what do you get as a service provider or somebody who closes one of these loops that you mentioned before? Do you only get the circles? Can I pay my rent from these kind of circuits? Can I pay my service provider with these kind of service? Or is there again the boundary? Because that's always where, from my perspective, these kind of projects fail.
Yeah, that's a really good point. It's not possible to exchange circles for any fiat currency, and it's not planned, right? So, of course, currently there is no way of paying your taxes with circles or paying your landlord unless your landlord would accept circles, which is not totally impossible. We have had conversations with people also from the city administration to think about potential use cases where it would be possible to claim public services with circles. But of course, there are a lot of other providers and clearing stations in between, and it's currently we are not at that point to really break out of those circles. But before we think of breaking out of these circles, we are still busy with building them, making sure that we come up with a number of economic circles that work in such a way that no external incentivization is needed, as you pointed out, in forms of euro redemption, but where there is enough incentives, enough motivation to buy from each other to keep the loop going. And we are not there yet, so this is underway. Sometimes we have the feeling we are really getting close, but this is work in progress. Any more questions?
How many users do you have and returning users? Data?
Yeah.
I mean, there are different perspectives on it. I think when we launched 2 years ago, then it crashed an entire blockchain because 200,000 accounts were registered, but they are definitely not active. I think nowadays there's like at least like 100,000 active wallets around the world, but yeah, we need to look ask our researchers who just appeared here because they could give you a better picture of the trust network, where you actually see the different nodes being active with each other. I can tell you in Berlin, there's like at least a couple of hundred active people who use it almost like on a daily or weekly basis at least. And there he comes, Julio. Maybe you can answer the question on like how actively Circles is used yet.
Yeah, so we have about, I think in the pilot in Berlin, about 1,000 people more or less that use it actively. I mean, it's we have about 20 businesses that are in the pilot, and also people outside of it that also give stuff for it, no? I think in terms of the types of producers and stuff, we were just at another festival called the Zero Waste Festival. I don't know what I think about this idea of zero waste. I think it's a bit of greenwashing, but in general, the producers are doing more like upcycling types of things for food. So, for example, Roots Radicals, they take food that comes already from like supply chains that doesn't get don't get sold, and then they transform them into goods. So sauces, many very tasty things, and I think they're also helping out with the food today here. So yeah, we also have some farmers from Brandenburg, and also like service providers, people who do therapy, massages. So we're trying to also focus it on the care sector, the distribution sector, and on the local production. I mean, we have a big crisis among us coming very soon, so I don't think we will be able to handle the wave of the energy crisis and so on, but definitely it will help us to learn a lot in this coming months.
Thanks, Julio. Irene.
Question one. I don't know if it's the last question, but you said you're doing quite a lot of experiments around different economic experiments. And you say you're not quite there yet. So my question would be, what would you need to go to that next level? And please don't say funding, because we all need funding for our initiatives. So apart from funding plus, what would be the thing or the two things that you think it would help us take this?
Yeah, thanks, Irene, for asking the question. I mean, let's start from ourselves, right? What would you need in order to be able to engage in such an economic loop? You would need to be able to acquire things that you need, but you also would need to give away things that you have to offer. So I think that is like the basic thing. For us, for Circles, that means from the around 20 business partners that are there already, it should be more, so that there is a broader variety of products and services at hand. So for instance, if we have tax consultants there, if we have people helping with particular consultancy services that otherwise you have to pay for in fiat money, people who do accounting work, for instance, I think that would be a really good example. So really to gather a broader variety of these things that sort of reflects on the economic ecosystem when you run a business, that would be extremely helpful. And this is where we are currently working towards.
Yeah, I totally second that. It's the number one thing we need, because we have enough money if you consider Circles already as the money we want to use anyway. We have many users. So, like looking at the two sides of a marketplace, we just need the products and the services. And to clarify some numbers, it's right, we have like 20 business partners which we work very close with, where we support them with some fiat incentives, but it's again like more than 100 business partners at the marketplace who offer other things. But this needs to grow into the thousands and tens of thousands and kind of like millions of products to make it appeal to the people who are then buying more things, which again brings in more business partners, because then they know they can earn money with them.
Okay, I think our time is over. Felix is the next one. We should not cut away from your session. But please, if you have questions about Circles, we are here. Julio's here, Blanca is here, the other board member. Our beloved team of developers from Bitspossessed Collective is here. So we have many people here who can help you setting up a wallet. It doesn't cost anything. You get your circles simply because you're a lovely human being. So make use of it and see you around.